Okay. I want to show that because I know some people did not have a chance to read the book or even start the book. We're focusing on the prologue this evening. And for those of you who read the book, you'll have to help me out here and some of the questions that we're going to have. And because some of the people who did not read the book may not be able to speculate or answer the question, but can listen and perhaps with some of the imagery I'm going to show, offer something in return as we talk here. One thing I'm going to screen share right now, at the very beginning of the author, Tommy Orange, who is an urban Indian from Oakland, California, focuses in on the image of, I'm going to show the image again. I had it up there briefly. Let's do it again, screen share. Here we go. So just to give you a little background, those of you who might be as old as I am, and I'm not even sure, let me check my driver's license. I'm not sure how old it is. I forgot now, it's been so many years. But anyway, at the very beginning of the book, he refers to the test pattern that's on a television. So some of you pipe up if you actually had an actual experience of seeing a test pattern on a TV. I don't see any hands going up. I don't hear anyone saying they saw one. So interestingly enough, our first initial question or essential question, I'm going to say that out loud. Why do you speculate that Tommy Orange opened There, which is the title, with the TV test pattern? And it's kind of interesting to me as someone who actually saw the test pattern as a young person. Usually it came on around midnight and was on early in the morning. So when you're kids and you're waiting on Saturday morning to watch cartoons and you wake up before 6 o'clock, I think it was around 6 a.m., maybe 5 a.m., you would see this test pattern. And there was different versions of the test pattern. This is one example. I have a few other examples, but I think you get the idea here. And he describes in the test pattern the art of a Native American, ostensibly a chief or a warrior leader. So my first question I'm going to put out there, maybe somebody can join in. Why do you think by the way, Tommy Orange is 38. So I'm sure he's seen the test pattern because obviously he's done some research and he's done some investigation and he uses that imagery at the very beginning of the book. Why do you speculate he would use this image? That's the first question for this evening. Anyone want to join in with that? Okay, I'm going to start speculating then. I don't really know. I didn't take any time to really investigate and research. I purposely didn't want to do that. I just wanted to have the opportunity just to contemplate and think about it. I did a little bit of research on the art involved of the Native American chief used in the test pattern. This test pattern was used for engineering purposes, and it was actually created by the RCA company in the 1930s. This is way before television became common, which was more in the late 1940s, early 1950s. But the test pattern would come on, and I found out that an artist for the RCA company decided to do a drawing of a Native American. And this is ostensibly the drawing that he actually made. Hopefully everybody can see it. If you can't see something, be sure to speak up. So I know that I have the screen share working. So anyway, it's kind of obscure that here, this urban Indian, the wonderful author, who's obviously dedicated a lot of time and energy to this book, why did he start off with this image? Of all things, there's so many things. He did start off with some more descriptions in the first part, which we'll get to later in the prologue. But I guess I'll just start since no one's joining in. I'm just going to go ahead and speculate. Speculate just means we don't know the answer.
I'll chime in.
Okay. Who is that?
This is Barbara.
Okay.
Hey. I wonder, and I'm just speculating too.
It's a speculation. That's right.
Right. I wonder, could it be because typically you would see a test pattern either at the end or the beginning of the day, because I do remember seeing like the color test patterns, and usually that would come on when all the shows ended, like around midnight.
That's right.
Or it would start the day early in the morning.
Right. As I mentioned, my brother and I would get up to watch cartoons on Saturday morning, and we're upset that this is up there. Yeah.
So to me, I would kind of think, oh, okay, you know, this is the beginning of the book, the beginning of his story. Maybe there's some kind of significance. I don't know. I'm kind of reaching.
No, that's okay. That's what we're here. We're speculating. That's a very good point. If you look at the rest of the prologue, he does give a very, what would you call it? For those of you who have not read the prologue to an historical backdrop to Native American history in a very intense and very targeted way. And so he could have just started with that. He talks about Thanksgiving and a lot of other horrendous kind of things that happen in Native American history in the US. But he starts off with the test pattern. So, I mean, just by speculation and association, it is the television, it's technology. Why not use another image? Why not have the image of, I don't know, how about something else? Maybe the eagle, the US bird is the eagle, the bald eagle. Why not that? Why not a president? How about George Washington? So in his mind, there had to be, he just didn't do this randomly, in my opinion. That's what I'm speculating. He had to choose to start off with this image. And my speculation is there was a lot of imagery around, I'm just going with the historical things that I've learned. So I'm not saying they're right. I'm just saying these are things that I associate based on reading, looking at history, teaching history. But the Native American image of the head was put on, you know, I think the nickel, the penny, during around, I think it was around early 1900s. They had the Buffalo Bill show, Western show, and it was all over the country, especially in the Eastern United States. And there'd be a Native tribe that would come out and dance. It would be those riding their horses. They played into that stereotype, the stereotype of the American dream, the American adventure, the westward expansion, the country becoming coast to coast, and the sort of the, I guess, the taking over of the Indian territory, stealing the land, going over the land. In fact, in our class this week, we talked about the breaking of the treaty in Battle Mountain, Nevada. They're still fighting over that from the 1860s in court. I mean, there's been some court things, but they haven't resolved it yet. So he picked this image, and to me, I'm associating it with more a stereotype. I'm just, again, that's my speculation. Here you have an artist.
Can I chime in, Greg, when you're
please.
done?
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, just when I read this in the book, first of all, I don't remember, I guess not old enough to remember seeing this on the television, but I feel like I have seen television shows that showed this on their televisions.
Yes,
like,
that's true. I've seen that too. Yes.
Yeah. And to me, whenever I see like this picture of an Indian head, this kind of thing, it sort of signifies the romanticizing of the Indian experience that, you know, sometimes is the white perspective. And maybe he wanted to draw attention to that to show the stark contrast of the reality of the urban Indian experience. That's kind of what I gathered. But like, I don't know the history, and I'm still totally confused about why they put this on TVs. I mean, I see all the problems with it, but technologically, like what was the purpose? What does it have to do with engineering? Like, I don't know that.
Oh, you're so intuitive. Hold on one second here. I'm going to
Okay.
stop. I'm stop sharing there. I'm going to go on to the next image. Here's what, if you can see, can you see this one? Okay, let me share again. Hold on. screen share. There we go. You asked about the engineering. I was thinking the same thing, so I looked it up. You can, I don't really understand it because I'm not an engineer, but they had different things that were on the screen that would indicate something to the engineers in terms of the imagery on the screen. And I don't know if you can read some of those words or not. They're kind of small, I expect. And can you see what those say?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, good.
In red, you mean?
Yeah, in red. Those are what the engineers were looking at.
Yeah, so let's see, I'll read one. This one here at the top says vertical wedge to check resolution.
Yeah,
And
that's a
then-
number. That's Hertz resolution has to do with the cycles per second
Right.
in the electrical language. Yeah.
And the Indian head for setting brightness and contrast.
So there says something right there. Okay. But why did they?
think it was-
Actually,
It
could
was
have been
used for
any picture.
calibration. 'Cause
Yeah,
I don't mean to interrupt. I think it was used for calibration, just kind of as a starting point.
Exactly. Thank you. I mean, we could spend, we could get an engineer in here and talk for a long time on this, but you did ask, well, why was it used? So it doesn't really answer why the artist created the Native American. We've speculated there. The other thing we had in our class too is sometimes the stereotypes of using the Indian headdress. Not all Indian tribes had Indian headdresses. So it was kind of a stereotype. I'm not an expert on all the 500 and some tribes. I know many of the tribes, they had to earn those feathers through various means. And if we had a Native American on with us who has more historical training, they would probably be able to explain it, but it had meaning. It wasn't just something you just bought at the store and put on. So, but it was very stereotypical to think of all Indians or many Indians have the Indian headdress. Again, somebody mentioned about the kind of the glit and the glamour and the stereotype and the American, what would you say? Dramatizing of the Native American. It was in a way, you could think of it as, especially when you contrast it with what he goes into in the prologue after that. For those of you who read the prologue, it's very intense. I mean, I encourage people to read it. It's not that long, but it's way different than just looking at an image. So maybe there was a purpose for contrast, possibly. Here is the glamorization or the stereotyping of the Native American image. But here's some reality of what happened. Possibly that's, again, I'm speculating. I'm just going off the top of my head here, just throwing out different things. Another image, I'm going to take this one down. Stop this. Let's go here. Okay. Hold on a second. Thanks for your patience.
And two, while you're looking, I wanted just to add, how about the concept of, is it gendered to have the male Indian headdress like that? Like, would a female Native American wear the headdress like that necessarily? I wonder about that too.
As far as I know, that wasn't true. It's more and again, I'm not an expert, but I'm just going based on what little I've learned. It was more the chief or those people who were leaders in the tribe who have earned, I guess, degrees of initiation through different things that they learned over time. And this is kind of a blurry one, but sometimes it would actually, right before this would go off, it would say, please stand by. So again, late at night, early in the morning, usually dark. And I think somebody mentioned that time of day, maybe it had association with the dark time of day when we're not really looking at ourselves. And let's take a good look at what's behind the scenes. Maybe there's an implication there. And all those of you, well, I don't think anyone except me ever remembers this in real life, but there was usually a tone that goes along with it. And that tone was very irritating. I think it was at 400 Hertz, I read somewhere. This means cycles per second of sound. And it was very irritating. Sometimes we turned down the sound because you didn't want to hear that for like 45 minutes straight. Apparently the engineers needed that sound for some reason in order to, part of the calibration process to get the station ready for the day. So anyway, that was the first question that I wanted to throw out there. The speculation of why he started off with this, he's an urban Indian. Maybe he got it. He has a lot of characters in the book and in different ages. So some of them probably told him about this too, I would expect. Apparently it meant something to him. I would love to ask him, why did you start with this? Why didn't you start with something else? Those of us who do writing, you know, you don't necessarily just pop up with an idea all the time. You think it through. And he did have training as a writer. I think he had a master's in writing. So if he was working with someone to learn how to write, I'm sure he thought about his prologue more than just off the top of his head. There had to be something to it. And we're just going through speculation and association here. But some of the ideas I think are pretty good. But again, it's not in the memory of most people. That's another point, bringing it up as here's something from our past that most people are not aware of. There could be that association as well. I think I'm the only one on the call that remember seeing this, and it was very annoying at the time because all you wanted to do is watch television. You didn't really want to see this. And I'll be honest with you, I don't remember the Native American head on the screen. I was probably so unconscious. It was just part of what, in those days, people just associated unconsciously. And I never brought to my attention until I actually read the book and I looked it up. I said, oh my goodness, yeah, that's right. I remember that now. But at the time, no, I didn't really pay attention to that. I was just looking at the overall image and it was annoying to me. I didn't know what it meant. I don't know why it was there. I was just a kid. So anyway, that was, anyone else want to add to the speculation before we move on?
So just one more thing about this test. So I grew up in like the 70s and 80s, and I remember the hum noise.
Yeah.
And somebody would come on and say, this is a test. This is only a test. And as kids, we were like, oh, this is when they charge you for watching TV. So turn it off really fast. You know, we made up a reason, but we never saw the Indian head. So at some point that fell away and they were still doing these tests.
I think I'm not giving an historical expertise here, but like in our class in 1969, Native Americans took over Alcatraz. It was a major protest at the time, and you said the 1970s. So there was a change because of the civil rights movement toward more having the opportunity to put yourself in the media to say that our rights are being violated as well. And it could be that the sensitivity toward, there began to be more sensitivity toward the feelings of other people. Different racial false belief systems that really got in the way of really allowing Americans to be free totally and be part of the American experience in a free and open way. That I'm speculating on that, but I could see that. Now, when I was looking at seeing this test pattern, this is the 1950s. In the 1950s, it was basically, best word I can say is just major unconsciousness, just not oblivious to really the needs of other people, living in an homogenized America that had some positives, but also blocked out some of the memories of the past. There was almost an amnesia that went on. And good, bad, or indifferent, that's kind of how it went. As we got in the 60s, that changed dramatically. Obviously, you know, the Vietnam War, the civil rights movement, and so on. So anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd just like to add, I also remember seeing a tusk pattern, but not the Indian head pattern. But I do think that maybe one of the things he was trying to bring awareness is that I think that some of this indigenous imagery has gone unnoticed in a way that so I was just thinking of like just recently, Land O'Lakes took the maiden off of their butter wrappers. I mean, that just happened like a few months ago, and I was
What did they
just
take
noticing-
off? What did they take off?
The Land O'Lakes,
Yeah.
the butter. She's on the.
Oh, like a Native American
It's a
woman.
Native American woman
Okay.
who's kneeling down, kind of with her hand, and they like that is just starting to happen. Minnetonka
Hmm.
just made a statement recognizing that they're the moccasin slippers that they've been marketing, etc. for came out of cultural appropriation in some ways. So I do think that maybe there is, some pointing out on his part of this is some things that we haven't acknowledged.
Oddly enough, I grew up on Lake Minnetonka, so I can relate.
Yeah, so I do think that there's some of that in the preview that pointing out some things that may have gone unnoticed and unseen because they've been such a part.
Yeah, that sounds like a good speculation to me. I'm still liking the speculation that it's in the night from midnight till 6 a.m. where people are asleep. And, sleeping America, there was still something on the screen. I don't know. That's an association that I'm making right now, but you can see there's a lot of possibilities. But I might even, now that I'm more curious, I might actually take the time to do a little more research, because I did a little bit of research about Tommy Orange. I might share briefly that before we move on to maybe another question. But I found it really interesting that, and I don't really have a reason why he lives there. He lives in a place in California called Angel something.
Angel Camp. Angel's
it.
Camp.
Angel's Camp. It's
Yeah.
about a 2-hour drive from Oakland. And I looked at it, it's only 3,000 people live there. So it's very rural. And I'd love to ask him, why do you live here? I could speculate, I wouldn't mind living somewhere quiet and easygoing versus a more urban area, but it kind of depends on your background. I did look at the population breakdown in Angel's Camp, and Indigenous population is about 1%. So who knows? He may have family there, friends there, or whatever, but that's where he lives with his family, and he's around 38 years old. So I just wanted to throw that out there. We can move on to another question.
Well, I wanted to ask about that just a little bit, just in terms of, that goes into like this, the Indian head and then the urban native identity versus one that's more associated with, I don't know, feathers, land, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's part of what it seems to come through this book anyway. But I wonder if that was some of the messages or some of the stuff he's interested in, and maybe it impacted. He was living in Oakland, and then, and now he's living separate from that. And just that whole concept of the urban native identities versus that's more associated with the land, or rural, or the land, or smaller.
Well, since you brought that up, I have another photo I'm going to throw out there, since you brought up urban versus rural. And I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Hopefully you can see that. Now, this is a photo that was taken by Brian Melendez, who's visited our class and is a friend of mine. He's done a podcast called Coffee with an Indian. If you want to get a picture of a 21st Indian experience, you should listen to his podcast, Coffee with an Indian. So here we are. He takes this picture. They're going to have some sort of a ceremony. He does lead ceremonies, traditional Native American ceremonies. He's a Paiute, Western Shoshone, and others. Going back to the word speculate, where would you think this is? Is this urban or is this rural? Anyone want to guess?
Looks like it's in his backyard.
There you go. Okay, so yeah, it's in his backyard. So he's recently moved to Las Vegas for a variety of reasons, not forever, but for now. And since let me pull up another image. This one is a painting of a similar environment, but somewhere else. Hold on a second here. Let me get that up here. Okay. And share the screen. Okay, this is, if you can see this, someone did, using a photograph, did a kind of a painting or an artistic rendering of this scene. There's something a little bit similar here, the wall. And this is actually out at Hungry Valley, which is very rural here in northern Nevada, not far from Spanish Springs High School. So he did a similar setup from the urban to the rural and the rural to the urban. So he's still going to continue in the backyard in Las Vegas. So we had a panel of students come to our class the other day, Native Americans at UNR, and there is a lot of reasons why they navigate between the worlds, between the reservation and the urban environment. One of them is not enough money, not enough jobs, but they still navigate and practice their cultural heritage. It's more accepted, and they do it more often now. So from urban to rural today, that transition is a little bit more acceptable. It's also necessary just to live sometimes, but I just wanted to share those images. I thought that was interesting between the urban and the rural, and there's a very similar scene between the two places that they practice their traditions. So anyway, so we're a little past halfway. If no one minds, I'd like to move on to another question if possible. I'm going to go ahead and do that. But I might share this with my class the other day. Before we move on to the next question, I'll read it out loud first so you can think about it. So the second question is, do you believe the historical information in the prologue was a wise literary choice? Why or why not? So I'll throw that out there, but before you answer that or think about, as you're thinking about it, let me read this quote from Carl Jung, a very famous 20th century psychologist who was studying cultures around the world to improve his understanding of the human psyche. And one thing, I'm going to read just a short section of it. He came to America in 1932 to visit the Pueblo Indians in New Mexico. And he was able to meet with Chief Mountain Lake. So there's just about a paragraph here. I'll read it out loud. So Carl Jung says, I was able to talk with him, that's Chief Mountain Lake, as I have rarely been able to talk with the Europeans. And the chief says, he commented about white people. And he said, see how cruel the whites look. Their lips are thin, their noses sharp, their faces furrowed and distorted by folds. Their eyes have a staring expression. They are always seeking something. What are they seeking? The whites always want something. They are always uneasy and restless. We do not know what they want. We do not understand them. We think that they are all mad. And then Carl Jung says, in response to Mountain Lake, Carl Jung says, Mountain Lake finished up what he said. He said, they say they think with their heads. Again, the head, okay? Indian head, so on. And Carl Jung says, well, of course we think with our heads. What do you think with? Of course, my students who are on the call tonight, on the Zoom, know what he said. Anyone want to guess?
Heart?
There you go. We think with our heart. So it's a whole different cultural view of the world. And so this gets into the next question too. Let me say it one more time. Do you believe the historical information in the prologue was a wise literary choice? Why or why not? If no one wants to jump in, I'm going to start with some of my speculations and thoughts, which I don't really know if it's accurate. Because I thought after I read the first prologue there and the intensity and how I felt emotionally with the different descriptions of sort of a short history of the horrendous behaviors of whites towards the Native brothers and sisters that we have. I wondered, well, why did he put that in the beginning as a starter? A part of me thought, well, why not put it at the end? Why not tell your story and let the story speak for itself? I'm not saying I'm right by that. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm a writer myself. I've written books, and I think of those things. I've written screenplays. Some writing schools say, don't tell people what you want them to know. Show it in your story by what happens to the people, what they say, what they do, what they feel, how they're tested by different things that happen in their lives. Yet he, right up front, just lays it out there. Here's where we're coming from. Here's our background. Here's our pain. Here's our suffering. And it's very powerful. Obviously, it really grabs your attention. And you do, as a writer, want to have something in the beginning that really gets people to continue reading the pages and moves and propels them forward. Although I have to say, I wish I would have read the whole book in the summer. I got so busy in the fall, just got the book. I'm halfway through, but still the content of the other chapters are very powerful. So it's not like he let us down after this amazing, intense first prologue. But my speculation is he really wanted to grab your attention. He wanted to really, for those who are Native American readers, they can probably relate to it pretty easily if they have any connection to their tribal heritage at all. And of course, there are tribal members who don't have that tribal connection very strong, although it's coming back much better now in the environment that we have. It still has a long way to go. So does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I was just gonna say, I would really love to hear some other thoughts. I had my English 101 students read the prologue and respond to it. So it was totally out of context for them. They were not reading the entire novel unless any of them elected to do so. And then they did a reflection on some challenges of it, because I thought for myself, picking up this book, and I picked this up on an airplane flight home, not knowing much of the context, and I totally remember like sitting on the airplane reading this and some of those challenges. And so I was really interested in hearing some experiences of readers as they were coming into this, of what he was doing. So I would love to hear some other perspectives. If any of you out there would like to share.
Did your students share any of that yet?
Yeah, they did. I had them do a brief reflective response on some challenges with reading the prologue, and a lot of them were absolutely like, wow, it just jumps right into some really intense stuff without grounding the reader, without giving the background. Like you just jump right in.
Yeah.
So.
No, it's an attention grabber.
Disconcerting. It's disconcerting, I thought, or it was, but I'd love to hear if anyone else wants to.
Well, disconcerting, yeah. To me, it was a very emotionally gripping feeling. Some of the things that our country has done in the past, not only to the Native Americans, but to other people, has been horrendous. So he gets right to it. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. I mean, he turns some of those memories. Sometimes some people have a little bit of understanding because they've read something or seen a documentary, but this goes a little bit stronger. I mean, it really paints a picture of a horrendous and wholly negative experience. So yeah, my experience was emotionally powerful.
I wonder if he wanted to get us out of our heads,
There you go. Well, that's a good insight.
And reading this book from our hearts, from the very first character we're introduced to, so that we want to know what's inside that character. And because almost that whole concept of the Indian head as disembodied,
Yeah.
and in cyberspace used as this sort of very fuzzy image in the background, for media
Yeah,
as and that whole concept of invisible but there. I want and that he wanted us to get into that surrealistic, out of our heads logical thinking, where you try to deny genocide, you try to deny these things, and into our souls and into our hearts as
I
we
love
read
that.
these characters.
I love that. Yeah. Because just to repeat what you're saying in a different way, showing the test pattern is very analytical. It's very engineering. It's very scientific. Television was the internet of the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, that type of thing. And so it's very, media oriented. But like you say, we don't stay there very long with that image, with that thought. It was a little puzzling to me. I can see where people don't know about the test pattern. Why is that? What's that mean? I never saw one. But right away, it takes you, like you say, right out of the head and right into your gut and your heart. And you're touched. And you want to know, what are people going through? And of course, there's lots of characters that he introduces along the way and what they're going through in a lot of different, emotional ups and downs. Yeah.
Yeah, and on that, Greg, I'll just say, for me, as a reader, my sort of feeling was, it was intense, and you're immediately sort of involved in the book. And I think it was artistically a wise choice, because you need that context. And so it felt to me like sort of like a snapshot of all the crap, for lack of a better word. It's not very long, the prologue.
No. He gets right to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like a little glimpse of these things, almost as like reminders. For most of us, I think we have some familiarity with these stories, but we need that to kind of have an understanding of where these characters are coming from. And I can't help but think about that aspect of history, because that's what I'm going to be talking about in a couple of weeks for my book club. This and the Baldwin quote where he says, history is in us and we are in history. They cannot escape this. This is a part of them. These experiences, even though they weren't physically there, are a part of them. So it's an important, I think, introduction to these characters. And I read somewhere about him, and he was talking about how he is a part of each one of these characters, or each one of them represents him in some way. And that was interesting to hear about the different ways. But there's this interconnection that they talk about in these indigenous culture all the time, that white culture we just sort of like missed the mark on that, like understanding how connected we all are as human beings. And I think this book reminds us of that. Oh,
yeah, that feels really good. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's a tough one. And of course, we have several people that are on the Zoom tonight who have not read the book, and we're hoping that somehow this stimulates an interest in picking up a copy of the book. Where can you get the book again? Somebody said that TMCC has some?
Yeah, at TMCC, we still have copies left. Yes, at TMCC in the disco, which is the right there in the student center, right near this SGA. It's the International Diversity Inclusion Office.
Okay,
and
I know where that
still
is.
have it there. Yeah.
No, do you have to show your TMCC ID to get a copy?
No, there they are. Just get it.
Okay.
Come in and get it, people.
Okay.
And
They're there.
what I was wondering, how there's how I wonder the documentary and storytelling, there's a character in there that's trying to do a documentary and with allowing Native Americans, indigenous peoples to tell their stories without an agenda, without asking questions, without guiding it towards an agenda. And I wonder if that prologue was trying to, again, disembody the Indian head and take away the agenda, almost have it be so that the stories that come afterwards are coming from from people's voices that are connected to their bodies versus this disengaged kind of narrative head or something like that, that's telling what people's stories should be. I don't know if that came out clear.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And you can look at that all through our American history. I mean, if you go to Mount Rushmore, you're not going to see, you see disembodied heads up on a big kind of mountain side. You don't see the full thing, you just see the head. That's commonly used through our culture. Again, the emphasis that Carl Jung thought, well, we think with our head. Of course we do. Well, that's not what everybody thinks with. And I think, I know that they're still working on a Native American display at the Mount Rushmore area. I think it was Crazy Horse. I think they're doing a large sculpture, and it's more than just the head. There's more of the full character, the full body. So I think that was more of a Native American, and I use the word I think, see, there's that head thing again right there, as opposed to I feel or I sense or I know. That's an important distinction. You hear that, you see that a lot. And could be that was part of what they were feeling with that new Crazy Horse, which has been going on for about 30 years. He'd been constructing that image on the side of the mountain there. But yeah, good point. Get out of the head. That definitely pulls you out of the head, that first prologue, not a doubt about it. You can't read that unless you're totally stone cold. You're really, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
You're going to be, something's going to be struck that's not just in your head. There could be a lot of emotions. There could be fear, there could be anger, there could be misunderstanding, there could be hostility, there can be compassion, there can be worry, there can be, some people might feel guilt, possibly, or shame, or just, if you're a Native American, maybe you could feel like, I'm glad somebody's just putting it right out there right now. Let's not beat around the bush. This is what happened. So let's get on to our story. Let's get that behind us and just tell individual stories of each character. Yeah, good points.
And how about the image that you showed of Brian's artwork or Brian's display
Yeah,
in contrast to the disembodied head, in terms of how grounded that is, how part of the earth that is, his display that you showed.
I'll show it again. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like very opposite to that, and yet that's what a lot of European Americans. Yeah, there we go. Although look, there's what I wonder what is that bull? What's that head piece?
It could be a bison, could be a cow.
It's a
Oh,
skull. Yeah.
It's a skull. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the whole imagery here is about earth
Yeah.
and fire and air, the four elements. So, and grounding. It's part of the reason that they have the ceremonies, to connect with Mother Earth,
Mhm.
to reconnect to your source and not just be in your head.
Mhm.
We tend to think a lot in our heads, random thoughts constantly whipping through there. A lot of them aren't so positive. Some of them are like negative, or their worry, or their fear, or who knows. But this is a grounding ceremony or tradition, and the connection back to the earth. So yeah, very
And
good point.
that's more palatable to European Americans, white Americans that are disengaged from the reality of the history than that prologue. That prologue isn't very palatable.
No.
But this is more palatable, and this is coming from so this is coming from a Native American a voice and ritual, versus the Indian head superimposed into white American media, in that, with that unpleasant voice sound tone you were talking about.
Yeah, that 40 hertz per cycle, per minute, or per second, I think it is, something like that. But it's a high pitched tone that's very annoying if you have to listen to it very long. So it's very disturbing. You didn't really go into detail about that, but when I went back to my memory and recalled it, I said, wow, it was hard. I had to turn down the sound if you sat there for a few minutes. It was just very disturbing sound. Just really odd. But here,
And
Go
were
ahead.
you saying, Greg, that you didn't notice the Indian head in that? You just heard the sound?
no, I remember the test pattern,
Okay.
but I specifically did not remember the Native American in the test pattern.
Wow.
Yeah, until I looked it up. I said, "Wow,
Wow.
what did that test pattern look like? I want to see what it was." And as soon as I saw it again, which I displayed earlier, I remembered, yeah, I remember that now.
Wow.
And of course, then in those days, especially on Saturdays, Saturday morning television also included, besides cartoons, many Western stories, very stereotypical Western stories, where you had the good guys and the bad guys. And you had, usually the Native Americans were painted as bad people. The antagonists of the story, those who were the so-called savage image that a lot of the white culture going way back over 500 years painted, all the way back to Columbus and before. So yeah, it's that was part of Saturday morning television too. You couldn't wait to see the cowboy and Indian show. And here you are, this innocent American young person, you really don't know what you're looking at. I mean, it just seems like you're drawn into a story, but you're actually being programmed and you're being inculcated with a certain stereotypical belief system that perpetuates what's gone on for all these hundreds of years. I mean, the powers that be, it was a very unconscious level. And so I don't know how many people, I have to speculate. I don't know if people created these stories planning to tell people these sort of stereotypical things. It was just sort of accepted. And that's kind of disgusting in a way, it's just sort of, that's normal. It's not anything to think about. But now today, of course, with books like They're There and other ones, and documentaries and Native American media productions are becoming a little bit more an opportunity for us more for those of us who are not aware, become more aware. And that his book, They're There, you can't help but become more aware. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So that's a real bonus to reading the book. The curiosity level definitely goes up if you're not familiar with his stories and his story and the stories of the things that he writes about. Your awareness level will definitely go up. It'll broaden your horizons. You cannot read that book and not go, okay, wow, there's so much maybe I wasn't aware of. And that's a beautiful thing, as far as I'm concerned. Anyone else have any contributions?
I would add to Michaela's point about that's where she talks about the separation, Michaela, where you're talking about the separation of the head and all that, because I think what the prologue was quite gory, but I kind of gathered from it, and from listening to you, Greg, talk about the test pattern, it seemed to me that in the prologue, you got the sense that, Native Americans were being portrayed as in the form of like entertainment, like you said, from the Westerns to the logos, the mascots, things like that.
Yeah, the Wild West show from Buffalo Bill. Yeah.
Right. And so in a sense, I think what came from that was they were being dehumanized. And I think he's reminding us, of that, but also that some of those things are still happening today. It's not only a thing of the past, but there's still a lot going on today that is, like you said, very, very slowly changing.
Yeah, I know as a young person growing up in Minnesota, Minnie means water in Native American, Minnetonka, Minnehaha Creek, Minnehaha Falls. I lived in a town called Wayzata, never knew what it meant. It's a Native American word, meaning on the north side of the lake, something like that. Probably is a mistranslation, but that's what I read once. And you go to school every day and you go walk down Indian Mound Street. And all of that was just so unaware. I mean, I wondered where our Native American brothers and sisters were. Here, all their names are everywhere. I mean, the town name, the street name are associated. The lake, Minnehaha Falls, I mean, had a story that goes back to Native American times, and they're just not there at all. In our class the other day, we had Marky Wilder, who's from the Washoe tribe out at Pyramid Lake. When I brought that up to her, she said, I know where they went. She said, they went to Minneapolis. They went to the city. They couldn't survive there for a lot of reasons, financially, probably financially for sure, she said, and also culturally. They probably had to become an urban Indian unless they moved to northern Minnesota outside the city area, city radius. So that's where a lot of urban Indians went, to the city. So I know we're coming down to the end of the hour. Does anybody want to add anything? If not, I would like to share something more. One thing I finished writing this summer was my new book of poetry. It's called Minnehaha Falls. And so when I grew up along Lake Minnetonka and all the streams that are all around the lake that pour into the lake, and the lake feeds into a creek called Minnehaha Creek and goes all the way down to Minnehaha Falls. Again, all Native American words and country, and then into the Mississippi River. So I just want to read one of the stanzas from my poem. The longer poem called Minnehaha Falls has, I don't know, 30 stanzas to it or something like that. I'm just going to read one of them. And this is something that really struck me later in life because I had a fascination with the buffalo growing up too, and still love the buffalo. So I'm just going to read that out loud. Okay, I took aim, chickadee, no bow, no arrow, no soul. The white hunter killer that senselessly slaughtered the buffalo, sadly, even the white buffalo. So I just thought I'd throw that out there as a similar emotional tone that the book brings out in many ways. So just this lack of thoughtfulness about why are you killing the buffalo? I mean, I'm sure people know there've been enough documentaries now, the massive slaughter of the buffalo, just piling them up and just dumping them. And then they had no food. They were starving to death. And anyway, just thought I'd share that here toward the end.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody want to mention what's going on next week?
Well, one thing
I'm-
is we need to get the link right. That's for sure.
Yeah. Hey, it all worked out.
Yeah, I guess so. But I think we had more people that wanted to come in. And
Yeah,
so
I know we did because I know Washoe County Schools was going to have some of their students come in tonight.
I know. So
yeah.
I need to figure that out with Rossi. And who's the next presenter?
That would be me.
Okay, so could
so I'll
you
be-
take charge with figuring that out with Rossi so that I'm not an intermediary that might mess things up?
I will coordinate with Rossi.
Yeah.
And I've got, so we're moving from Prologue to I'll be doing the first, I know it says 150 pages, but if we go to page 156, that's the end of part 1. So I believe it's 156. So I'm going to be looking at part 1, and the driving question is looking at, starting at looking at the narrative structure and that how that connects to meaning. And I think we were already, Greg was already kind of discussing some of that tonight, some of the authorial choices and how that affects the meaning and the way that we as readers interpret. And so I do want to look at, in particular, the author's decision to use all of these different characters and to bounce us around. And maybe there's some connecting threads of this, like we're getting we're jumping around, maybe we're getting disoriented, and how does that affect our reading? And how does that affect the meaning and interpretation? So that's where I'm hoping to go next week.
Looking forward to it, Molly.
Yay, Emily. Thanks.
Yeah, and what a wonderful start off, Greg. You really set the framework well for us.
I love the word framework. It's a good one. As we're all framing each other on our screens here tonight with, I don't see any test patterns.
Yeah, look, we're all disembodied heads.
Here we go. Perfect to start on Zoom. So, but anyway, yeah.
Nice
Sounds
for those
great.
people for those who got here. Very nice to see some faces. I don't know your students, Greg, but
I see
great to
about 5 of them I see on there.
very
yeah.
nice.
So they're going to get extra credit. I can see already that they were here.
Well, and also I think more importantly, right, just that getting into discussion and critical thinking and engagement with the ideas, so important, especially for those of us who love literature.
Mhm.
And just to let you know, I've teared up several times just in this discussion and hearing your stanza and just hearing and just being part of this discussion. And I feel like part of this discussion, this first book club, has gotten me thinking with my heart.
Wow. That sounds like a great conclusion right there. I'd like to leave thinking with my heart, not with my head. Yeah.
All right, and I'll get you the recording.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks all for joining. Have a
Thank
great
you.
evening. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.